Hello, friends. I'm Pastor Doug Pratt, welcoming you to the Life Academy and Episode 1 of our series on the biblical Rocky, one of the most fascinating people whose story is told in the New Testament portion of the Bible is a man known worldwide for nearly 2 millennia as Saint Peter and the Apostle Peter. His given name by his parents was actually Simon, but his rabbi Jesus gave him the nickname Peter. In the original language, literally Petros or rock. We will thus call him Rocky. Long before Sylvester Stallone created the film character of Rocky Balboa, this biblical Rocky followed a parallel path. He went from being an obscure nobody to great success and acclaim, but his course was not a smooth and unbroken upward climb, and we will follow it in detail with all its setbacks and triumphs. Various films, historical novels, and TV shows in modern times have attempted to imagine a backstory about this man called Rocky. And various actors have portrayed him in different ways, including in the currently popular worldwide phenomenon, The Chosen. Some of those depictions may be accurate and plausible, but we don't actually know all the details we would like to about his background, family, youth, and life circumstances. In this series, we will limit ourselves to the biblical texts themselves and what we can properly deduce from them. Change is hard. The further along in life we are, the more disruptive it is to alter our course. We become set. The more we have invested in our lifestyle, the costlier it is to change. That is why the dramatic and consequential changes Rocky undergoes in his adult life are so fascinating. In this episode, we will witness the first of his major turning points. An accomplished writer named Luke, a contemporary of Rocky's, has given us the most detailed description of this turning point, and you can read it for yourself in chapter 5 of Luke's biography of Jesus. As the scene opens, we find that Rocky is a professional fisherman working a large freshwater lake in the Middle Eastern region of Galilee. Fishing was a tough job in those days. It was daily, grueling physical labor with long hours and a risky business with no guarantee of success. Rocky had to cope with the unstable, changing forces of nature with only his bare hands and his wits. Unlike modern commercial fishermen, he had no high-tech navigational gear, no weather forecasting, no diesel engine fishing trawler, no mechanized winches for his nets. It was callus-producing, back-breaking work. A fisherman in the first century was an independent, self-employed businessman. He didn't work for a big corporation. He had no regular salary or hourly wages, no pension or IRA or disability insurance or Social Security to back him up. Rocky's life and the well-being of his family were solely dependent on his own efforts. He thus had to be independent and self-sufficient, competitive and aggressive, a risk-taker, and a man of action. Oh, and what about Rocky's personality? All indications are that he was an extrovert, perhaps even a loudmouth. He was impulsive, temperamental, and at times cocky. He had spent so much time on the sea, perhaps learning the business as a child from his father, that he took on the characteristics of the sea, often stormy and choppy with mood swings. Without doubt, he had natural leadership abilities, but until now, they were undeveloped. He was like a wild Mustang, unharnessed and uncontrolled. We now look in on Rocky and his brother Andrew, partners in the business, who have returned to shore after a long and frustrating night of failure. As soon as their nets are repaired, they're heading home to collapse into their beds. Now, night was generally the best time for fishing, especially in the hot summer months. In the heat of the day, the fish would go further down into the cooler water and thus were beyond the reach of shallow nets. In the evening, they would come back to the surface and be much easier to scoop up. But this particular night was a total bust. Along the shore that morning, Jesus of Nazareth has gathered a crowd and wants to speak to them. To make himself more audible, he asks Rocky and Andrew if he can borrow their boat as a platform. Now, Andrew had apparently already met Jesus previously and enthusiastically told his brother about him, and so perhaps Rocky has at least met or seen in the distance this man who would so change his life. But so far, nothing significant has happened between them until this fateful morning. After Jesus speaks to his audience, he surprisingly asks Rocky and Andrew to head back out into the lake to fish again. We can imagine the impulsive response. "You want me to do what? What do you know about fishing? This is the wrong time of day. If we couldn't catch them last night, we're sure not going to be successful now." But for some reason, he decided to do it against his better judgment. Maybe he wanted to humor this carpenter from Nazareth, or prove that he, Rocky, knew more about his craft. Or maybe it was the earnest words or the penetrating eyes of Jesus that he couldn't refuse. So, shoving off and rowing out, Rocky and Andrew tossed their nets one more time. And what happened was stunning. The nets were full to overflowing. They couldn't fit all the fish into their boat. Fishermen friends, James and John, watching from the shore, scrambled to help. It was the largest catch they'd ever seen, and in the most impossible circumstances. It had to be a miracle. Now think for a moment about the impact that this had on Rocky. His whole life, after all, had been devoted to catching fish. And now this man, Jesus, is demonstrating the power to produce fish at will. What a way to get Rocky's attention. Like walking into a weight room with football players doing their workouts and casually bench pressing 800 pounds. That would certainly grab their attention. Or like walking into a professor's physics classroom and calmly writing Einstein's most advanced equations on the marker board. Quite eye-opening. So how might we expect a guy like Rocky to respond when his attention is arrested like this? Well, we might guess that his initial response would be excitement. Wait till everyone in Capernaum hears about this. Or he might demonstrate professional admiration. I've got to hand it to you. For a carpenter, you sure know about fish. Or his business-oriented mind might have raced to a proposition. Let's be partners. You provide the fish, I'll catch them and sell them, and we'll get rich. But that's not what happened. This proud, independent guy is suddenly and uncharacteristically humbled. He gets on his knees in front of Jesus. Even more shockingly, he's afraid. "Go away, please. Leave me alone," he said. "I'm not worthy." In the face of an obvious divine miracle, Rocky, who is, from all indications, a typical first-century Jewish man who knew his Bible, has instantly recognized that he is in the presence of some unearthly divine power. And just as Moses in the Old Testament reacted in fear when God appeared to him in a burning bush, and Isaiah felt unworthy when he glimpsed the holiness of the Almighty, so Rocky feels exposed in his inadequacies. He's just a fisherman. More than that, he's just a sinner, a self-centered and unrighteous person like all of us at the core. But remarkably, Jesus does not accept that as the final verdict. He's not done with Rocky, but just beginning. "Don't be afraid, Simon," he says. "I know who you are. In fact, I know you better than you know yourself. I know all about the times you've been selfish and insensitive and proud and profane. I don't care that you think you're unworthy. Here's what I'll do. Instead of leaving you, I'm going to change you." The change begins with his profession. Rocky will now have a new and far more exalted calling. He will no longer pursue fish. His focus will be to reach human beings, those who are created in the image of God but have fallen away from Him. In Jesus' hands, Rocky's life will now count for something significant beyond just catching fish and making money. Suppose he had become the best fisherman in Galilee, made the most money, operated an entire fleet of ships, and owned the biggest house in town. Suppose he had become so successful that he was one of the richest men in all the country. So what? Would we have ever heard of him? Would his life have made any difference to the world? No. But Jesus gave our man Rocky a vision of a higher calling, to do something significant with his life. The only things on earth that are eternal are human souls. They alone are truly worth catching. At this moment, Rocky has no idea how to reach other people in a life-changing way. And as he confesses, he is indeed unworthy and unqualified at this moment. But Jesus is going to change him. The principle is one that has been repeated in every generation. The Lord does not call those who are qualified for the task. He makes adequate those He calls. And that is the story that lies before us. From this turning point, we will witness the journey of Rocky one step at a time under the tutelage of the great life changer himself to becoming a man who has a profound impact on the world. So join us for the next episode in the dramatic story of the biblical Rocky. This is Pastor Doug Pratt for the Life Academy.